Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and admit people. Well, welcome everyone who is joining us. You are in the Elmhurst Metro Station Improvement Project meeting. We will get started in just a couple minutes here. We're going to allow folks to log in here. So just bear with us another couple minutes and we'll get started. So again, welcome everyone who's just joining us. We are going to wait just a couple minutes to allow everyone to log in. But again, you're in the Elmhurst Metro Station Improvement Project meeting. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you could just sit tight for a couple minutes, we're gonna just give everyone a chance to log in. I see a few more folks have joined us. Again, we're just holding tight for a couple minutes to allow everyone to log in, and we'll get started in a couple minutes here. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I think we're ready to start. I will turn it over to Ben Harbour with CDM Smith to kick us off.
Thank you, Colin. Well, everyone, appreciate you blocking out an hour of your evening. This presentation is planned for 6 to 7 p.m. this evening. And again, I wish everyone could be at City Hall in person, but with COVID and also with the weather, we'll be doing this virtually. My name is Ben Harbour with CDM Smith, as Colin mentioned. I am the project manager for the Metra Station project, and I've been involved since the beginning with city staff. So I'm very excited to be here this afternoon, this evening, talking about phase 2. And we'll get into some specifics about where we are in the project. But before we do that, I want to go through some housekeeping. As this is a virtual meeting, we want to make sure we establish the house rules just like we would if we were in the chambers. First, the moderator will have you muted throughout the course of the presentation and the meeting. And I'll get into a little bit more of how to comment and provide feedback as we get into the presentation. Secondly, with regards to video, obviously bandwidth is incredibly important for clarity. So please keep your video turned off during the course of the meeting this evening. That will save bandwidth. And don't be surprised if your video is turned off by the moderator if you're not able to do that. Want to run through questions, as I mentioned. So what we'll be doing this evening is using the chat box function at the bottom of the screen. So if there are questions or comments that come up before we get into the workshop, and I'll explain that, feel free to put those in the chat. What we will be doing with the chat is not answering those during the course of the presentation and the meeting this evening, but we'll be compiling those for responses that will be provided on the city's website in the future. We will be posting, as I mentioned, likely by March 1st, all of the information that we gathered tonight and the responses. And the go-to location, as many of the invitations you saw, was the website for the city of Elmhurst. So that hyperlink is
I'm sorry, 1 second. Ben, you, for some reason, went on mute towards the beginning of the slide. There we go.
okay.
You're back, sorry. So I think
okay.
we lost you just at the end of the housekeeping. So I think we're good if you want to start from this slide.
Absolutely. So the agenda for tonight's meeting, first we'll go over a brief welcome. We will talk about the project background and overview. Again, some of the stakeholders on this call are familiar with the project over the last few years. It's been a little bit of time, so we'll kind of bring you back up to speed. For those that are just getting involved, this will be the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the project before we get into asking some questions and getting some feedback. After that, we'll open up, I will explain the virtual meeting room board and do an overview. We'll talk about wrapping up tonight's meeting and next steps. And then finally, we'll turn everyone loose in our virtual meeting room to spend time with the boards, provide comments that again, we will collect and provide responses for. And I'll explain also what we'll be using that information for. So before we get started, Mayor Morley was very excited about getting into phase 2, and I'll explain what that means. With that, he has a message for the group this evening, and I will be playing that. So let me know, Colin, if you can't hear. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Morley.
Hello, I'm Elmhurst Mayor Steve Morley. Welcome to the virtual visioning public meeting for the Elmhurst Metro Station Improvement Project. Our Metro Station is one of the most important focal points in our town, and this is a great opportunity for the community to weigh in on what it will look like. The original station was built in the early 60s and rehabbed in the late 80s. It is outdated and in need of upgrades and improvements. We began working on the improvement project in the fall of 2016. It took time to get through phase 1 of engineering, which included making sure the project was constructible, choosing the most qualified firm through a qualification-based selection process, and applying for various grant funding. I am proud to say that city staff has worked hard to secure $20.4 million in grant funding. We continue to seek additional funding opportunities. The total cost of this project is approximately $25 million. We are excited to be entering this next phase, which will bring us closer to breaking ground on the new station. I want to thank CDM Smith for their partnership and professional work. In this presentation, you will see various architectural styles and elements that are being considered for the station and the surrounding areas of the station. I encourage you all to take the survey and provide your input by ranking your preference in design styles and providing additional comments. This visioning meeting and survey will give CDM Smith the public's guidance to develop several alternative design concepts that will be shared and further reviewed by the community in future public meetings. The survey link will be posted on the city's website until the end of February. Thank you for your participation.
So I want to thank Mayor Morley for that message this evening, but I also want to take the time to thank our partner agencies that may be in attendance this evening. So this project is not just the City of Elmhurst, but there are a lot of other partners, both on the funding side and interagency coordination. So we'd like to thank everyone for attending that is part of our partner agency group. We'd like to thank the public, obviously, and other stakeholders that are on the call this evening. And we'd really like to thank elected officials and commission members as well for their historic support of the project and support going forward. And we look forward to your comments as well. And then finally, I want to take the opportunity to thank city staff, as Mayor Morley mentioned, again, for getting us to this point in many different ways and helping guide it going forward. So I'd like to thank everyone this evening for attending. So just going over a couple facts. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but again, we know that there are people on the call with different levels of history with the project. The existing station that is served by Metra at the City of Elmhurst dates back to the 1960s, and it was last updated in the 1980s. The existing station has some challenges that the city recognized on early on and engaged our team to take a look at. Those included accessibility, current amenities such as fire protection, cooling, ventilation, general accessibility across the site and safety, and then also the capacity of the station. So I want to highlight here very good news about the city of Elmhurst. And again, some of this information is pre-COVID, but again, we're anticipating that all of this will be coming back once things normalize. So the station has served approximately 2,300 weekday boardings, and that was as of 2014. That increased to 2,540 daily in 2018. And the current projections are to reach above 3,000 per day by 2038. And a lot of that has to do with the growth that the city of Elmhurst has undertaken and the investment in the downtown. The current station is the 4th busiest in the entire Metra system, and therefore the current facility is undersized for this ridership. I think for those that are commuters that can at least remember back if they were commuting recently, in the winter and in the summer, that space gets extremely tight. The project, as it is now, will result in a new station that will have ADA accessibility access for pedestrians moving from the north to the south of the site. And there will also be site improvements, including reconfiguring the parking from the station going west. We'll also have drop-off areas for commuters and bus drop-off for PACE and private shuttles. And we are looking to separate those vehicles from pedestrians and bikes for safety in the area. We'll also be including new green space and additional parking for bicycles of about 150 new spaces. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we are in the process. As Mayor Morley mentioned, phase 1 engineering was started in late 2016, early 2017. We looked at many different alternatives at that point of relocating the station, renovations to the station, what those impacts would be, and then developing a preferred alternative, as we call it. We've been working with the Illinois Department of Transportation and our partner agencies, as well as the city, to move through that process. Once we completed or near the end of that process, we have a station footprint, we have a site plan, which I'll explain what that means, but the general plan is in place. One of the key elements that we want to work with you and the city to develop is the architectural style. So the first part of our phase 2 process are meetings such as this, developing alternative concepts, which I'll discuss, and then moving forward with the final engineering, which will allow the project to go out for bid and then be constructed. Currently, based on the schedule that we have, we're hoping to start construction in 2023. So as Mayor Morley mentioned, I also want to point out through the hard work of staff and our partners, the project has been very successful in grant applications at the federal, state, and local levels. So there's a few different programs that are involved that are mentioned here. Just again, visually to kind of show you where we are in that process, where the star is, that's where you are in phase 2. And this is one of those public meetings that is referenced here. We will have future public meetings as these concepts develop further architecturally, and we'll have opportunities for everyone to see those. But we will also continue ongoing public and stakeholder engagement, not only through the design process, but also through phase 3 construction. It was very important to the city, since this is in the downtown, to constantly communicate and keep everyone informed, and also the opportunity to provide comments. So just want to highlight, while we're at this point today, we've had public outreach and we'll continue to do that throughout the process. So I want to discuss a little bit about your role. So first of all, I want to thank everyone again for this evening attending. The idea is to develop preferences or how the public views the downtown and would prefer in terms of an architectural style to see the station. With that information, our architectural team will look to develop 3 different concepts with slightly different styles. And then eventually that will narrow down to a preferred alternative. So the first step is the virtual public meeting today. We also have an online visual preference survey, which is very similar to what you're going to see this evening, but it's unmoderated and has rankings of a lot of the slides. So for those that couldn't attend this evening, if you know someone that would like to provide feedback, that online survey link is provided on the city website. And as the mayor mentioned, it'll be open through the end of February. And we will have future public meetings, as I mentioned. Just want to talk a little bit about the existing context. So we thought it was extremely important to identify the fact that the city has a long history. Some of the buildings in the downtown go back to the 20s and even before. And then there's also obviously very new developments. The station being the center of the city is a unique opportunity to help the city of Elmhurst in its identity. So that's one of the important things that we're trying to solicit this evening and on the online survey. So just wanted to show here for information to orientate everyone some of the recent city center developments, as well as some of the existing buildings that go back much further. So I think everyone is familiar just to the north of the site on Addison, some of the new development here. This is the existing station looking south. Pedestrian streetscape, all the work that the city has done in the city center, and the fountain and gathering here. Pointing out some of the more historic buildings, 125 North Addison, again, which is just north of the station, York Theater, which is an icon, and several other buildings, again, that are more on the historic nature. The new developments that I think, again, most people are familiar with, but 195 that's under construction currently, and several other buildings that have been completed in the last year or two. Here's another example, going back a little bit further. And then also to identify some of the civic buildings that, as we say civic, I'll kind of explain that, but want to show some of the civic buildings, obviously, that the city has. The public library, the art museum, the conservatory over at Wilder Park, the historic museum, City Hall, the police station, and then we chose 2 buildings just to show from Elmhurst University, but I think most people are familiar with kind of the general architectural aesthetic of the campus. At least these are newer buildings, but again, they're historic structures on the site as well. As I mentioned, the existing station, there are a lot of challenges in terms of the existing ridership. It's also an extremely tight site. And I'm pointing that out because in some Metra stations, we're able to increase the station size significantly and just make it wider. There's a lot of space around it. One of the challenges with this station is because of the street here and the tracks on the other side, and both of those things obviously can't move. We have very limited space to work with. But right now, we don't even have an ADA accessible path along the side of the station. I think everyone's familiar with, there are a lot of challenges with pedestrians walking, having to walk through traffic. Those with disabilities or challenges, again, a little bit difficult to access the station. So we took a lot of that information and motivation and developed the concept in phase 1. And I'm just going to go through again relatively quickly because you can spend some time looking at these boards when we do the breakout. But this is York Street right here, just to kind of orientate yourself. This is approximately the location of the existing station, but this footprint is showing the new station. We're also planning on a new outbound station. So instead of just coming across the underpass, which exists today, and coming up and right out of the stairs in a very small space, We're looking at a warm enclosed shelter for people that are looking to be picked up in the evenings, but also when the trains switch tracks, which they will continue to do, we'll have some additional options here. We'd like to point out that the current plan that is to keep the existing tunnel with some modifications, as well as adding a new pedestrian underpass that allows for ADA accessibility. So there's actually a ramp on both sides of the track that allow for people with wheelchairs, but also bikes, etc., to access a new pedestrian tunnel. That can be used for commuters because it's approximately in the middle of the platform, but it can also be used for pedestrians on York Street. We will be rearranging a lot of the parking and drive areas to reduce the amount of paving and to increase the aesthetic and opportunities in the downtown, as well as additional crosswalks for pedestrian safety. Also want to point out that the project also extends beyond Addison and reconfigures the north and south parking lots, again, to provide a path for pedestrians, if you kind of follow my arrow here, so that we're not in a situation where people have to walk behind cars and we have mixed traffic. So I'm trying to make this a little bit safer in the downtown, and also some new green areas. The proposed floor plan that's set here today. Again, this kind of matches the plan in terms of its orientation. If you're walking from York, you'd be walking to the left here. We have a 24-hour extended waiting area for people that are, when the station's closed, we'll still have a warm area to wait for trains while they're running. We have a vendor space. It's actually larger, obviously, than the current space. We also have ADA accessible toilet rooms and increasing the quantity of those as well, and then additional waiting areas. And as I mentioned, on the outbound side, we also will have a waiting area. This will include bike parking on the site, but we're also looking to include that in much of the covered space. So as I mentioned, the purpose of today's meeting and workshop is to talk about architectural styles. So a lot of us on the call are architects by background, but I want to make sure that we take the time to kind of explain what we're talking about. Just like a house, you may have a footprint or a rectangle, but the outside of it can look like many different styles. Something more traditional, something more modern, different materials. None of that is decided, only the footprint. So as we go through this and seek feedback, what we're looking for are your thoughts on how you would like to see the architectural style of the station. On the online survey that you may have seen, or you may take a look at later in terms of rankings, we're going to be going through some of the station examples. I don't want to highlight if something's specifically thought to be modern or a certain style, because I think a lot of that comes to visual, your own preference, and that's what we're trying to get. We don't want to cloud that. So we have images here, and once we get into the breakout session, you'll have the opportunity to comment whether you like certain images, whether you don't like certain images, why, and then feel free as we get into the comments to provide other buildings or other styles that you're interested in, or other comments about the project. So again, the idea is to provide a diverse range of styles. We're not pushing any of these. We just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to voice their opinion. Beyond just the architectural style of the outside of the station, we also want to get feedback on a few different elements that we see the project including. One of those is the station icon. I think everyone that's familiar with metro stations, but train stations, public transit facilities in general, it's a civic building. And in most cases, we want to identify that. And there's different architectural ways to do that. And sometimes it's the massing, which would be towers. Sometimes it's clock towers. There could be fountains. There's many different ways to do that. So what we're asking again is feedback on if you like any of these images, And even if you don't like any of the images, commenting or providing feedback on what you'd like to see to help identify when you're sitting at York Street or at Addison in the downtown, you can see this and identify that this is the train station. Here's a few other examples. Again, some of these are much larger scale. These will not be directly brought into the architectural concepts. Again, that's our job to take the feedback and incorporate that. We're also going to have waiting areas, as I mentioned, under the shelter, attached to the station, hopefully areas where you can take your coffee or your tea if you're not a commuter during the middle of the day and sit outside on a nice patio. Or if you are a commuter and nice weather, somewhere that you can stand outside. So want to get your feedback again on the architectural style of the exterior areas. We're also obviously going to have an interior of the station, and the current station is very basic, just has a floor, masonry walls, and that's about it. We're very excited to be able to bring something much more unique to the city of Elmhurst. So one of the things we'd also like you to comment on and think about is again, the character of the interior of the station. Again, I don't want to say one thing is more modern or less modern and what materials are included, just to get your feedback here. Waiting areas, again, coming down to how you'd like to see seating. If you have any thoughts on the pros and cons of some of these images, some of these, again, you would think of more as an older train station. Others you may not even identify as a waiting area. So I want to get your feedback on that. Also the vending space. We can work in a lot of different concepts for that. Right now we're assuming it's a coffee shop, some type of cafe that serves commuters. And again, you can, if there's any coffee shops that you're interested in terms of the style, restaurants, feel free to put those in the comments. But here are a few images that we identified for your feedback. Besides the station itself, we're obviously modifying the site as well. So we would also like to get some feedback on the site amenities. We have a new pedestrian underpass, and these images are just to solicit opinions. So when you see something like this, it won't look, it's more about the public artwork or the lighting, the feel of it. It would be unique to Elmhurst, and there'd be plenty of opportunities to comment on that. What we're trying to identify here is that this is a little more, I guess I will say a little more traditional in the look here. This is maybe a little more utilitarian. And then again, this has opportunities for art, for light, different things. I will say that the pedestrian underpass will be a tube because of the type of construction that the Union Pacific is going to require. So the shape will be round like this, but again, the treatments on the outside is what we're looking for. Your feedback on. Site lighting, the downtown has its own street lights and architectural character, but we would be open to taking a look at something that's potentially unique if it's worth it. Or we may go something that's closer to the city standards. So we'd love to hear your feedback on not just how the fixtures look, but more importantly, how they function. You can talk about security. You can talk about not wanting to be too bright, potentially for reasons, or other thoughts on that. We're very excited in terms of landscaping. I think everyone's familiar with most of the area right now is paved. And the reason for that is before the parking garages were constructed, there just wasn't a lot of space for commuters and for patrons going to businesses. So with the parking garages that the city has invested in, it's allowing us to create more space for landscaping in the downtown. There's obviously different ways to treat that. We will be taking a look at, environmentally sensitive design with the station and sustainability, but we also look at it on the landscaping side for things like stormwater management, etc. But just want to get your kind of feelings, things that are a little more formalized, some planters, and then something that's a little kind of more native in its look. We'll have a lot of bike parking, and that was something that we had in our funding made a point that this station will not just be for commuters riding the train, but it's about the intermodal connection of bikes, pedestrians, those are getting dropped off by vehicles and buses. So one of the things we want to take a look at is preferences on bike parking. We had some very good conversations early on, not only about the quantity of bike parking, but kind of the quality, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about how you would store your bikes for those that are riding bikes, and then for those that maybe aren't, the architectural character again. So it's a little boring to listen to me talk this entire time. The goal was, again, just to kind of bring you up to speed on the schedule, to talk about decisions that are made up to date, but also what we're going to be talking about in terms of feedback. What we're going to do is turn everyone loose into our virtual workshop, and I'll explain that in a minute. But before we do that, we really, as a team, as the city, everyone that's been involved, really want to thank you for your time and your input. We'll review all these, all the input, and help develop 3 different concepts. For updates on any comments or questions that you have, to provide additional feedback, and also to find out about future events, we'll be providing all that information on the Elmhurst website, /Metra station. So at this point, we're going to open up the virtual meeting room, and I'll go through how that works, but the key is you'll need to click or enter one of these links. Colin, our moderator, will include this in the chat window as well. And I think, Colin, that will be a hyperlink, is that correct?
That's right. So I think Ben is going to do a quick overview of the virtual meeting room. So I'll wait till he has an opportunity to do that, and then I'll post the link in there in the chat box so everyone can go directly to it.
Okay, thank you, Colin. So I'm going to, again, when we share that link, you'll be able to see what I'm seeing. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Colin, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So if we were in City Hall, just pretend that it's nice and warm and sunny, and we've made it through winter. Here's our virtual room that you can spin around, City of Elmhurst right here. Just like what you would do as coming into a public meeting, all I'm using is my mouse, holding it down with the left button. If you hold it down with the left button and move your mouse to the right or the left or up or down, that'll help you navigate circling the room. So just like a public workshop, if you came in, you have a little welcome here. Also want to point out that we have a sign-in. You're not required to include any information. This is a public workshop and meeting. But the reason that we want to offer this option to enter this information, which we really appreciate, is again, to get a little bit better sense of who is attending this evening, but also for future public meetings, we will be posting, just like we have on the city website and other ways, social media and print media, to let you know going forward. But with this, we can also send you email updates. So there you go. This first slide, you'll see these hyperlinks or bubbles here. If you do a single click, it will take you to that board. Just again, like if you were walking from the sign-in over to the first station. The project overview will have all of those slides that I went through to talk a little bit about the history of the station, the schedule. If you want to take a little more of a look at the station footprint and the site plan, that information is here. And in existing context. So you've got the project overview here, the existing information. Each of these has the opportunity to comment. So when you were taking a look at some of the slides I was going through, this will be an opportunity. Let me just do this on architectural style, for example, to show you. We have the back to board area and a next slide. Again, this should look very familiar from what I was going over. If you click the comments section here, this is what I was talking about. It's your opportunity to write in if you like some of these. If you don't like some of these, you can really get into a little bit more detail and take your time. We're going to keep this open a little bit, probably until about 7:30. So again, if you want to spend a little more time going through each of the images and writing a more detailed comment or detailed thoughts, you can do that here. Then you can go on to the next slide. This is all architectural style. Station icons. Interior character. Waiting area. Vendor space. And when you're completed, and whether you want to provide comments or not for each of these, you can go back to the board area and just kind of continue around the room. The other thing that we have at the very end, while the website for the city does have the visual preference survey, we also have a link at the end. You don't have to use this if you don't want to, but that will just take you to the website for the survey. Okay. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Colin, I know we're not going to take questions right now when it comes to the station itself. We're allowing, in the comments section, if people have questions or comments that we'll respond to later or on the boards. But are there any maybe common questions that are concerns about accessing this link or how to utilize it? And I can spend just a few minutes before turning everyone loose to make sure that as many people has the opportunity as possible.
Sure. Yeah, I think there were just one or two questions about accessing this information. And Ben, if you don't mind, I think I might be able to just handle them. So we will be posting a recording of this meeting on the project website. And I believe we can also post a PDF of the presentation on the project website as well, for those that just want to flip through it. And then I'll be posting here just in a minute a link to the virtual meeting room that Ben just provided a tour of. So that'll conclude this portion of the meeting, and you can click on that link and that takes you to the virtual meeting room, which you can explore on your own. So I think those were the main kind of logistical questions. Again, I know there are a couple other questions that came in, and we will review all of those and provide an FAQ on the website.
Okay. I know this is, again, very different than we would do in person, so I appreciate everyone's patience. We've tried to find different ways through the online survey, this evening's workshop, to solicit some of that feedback. And again, we'll be providing responses, but it's obviously not normal times, and hopefully we'll get back to this as soon as possible. We can meet everyone in person and have a chance to talk, but really appreciate everyone's time this evening. So we'll keep this up and active until I think 7:30. And as Colin mentioned, everything will be posted going forward. Okay. Thank you.